Hey everybody, welcome to Bestie Book Reviews. I'm here with my bestie Mandy.
And I'm here with my bestie Jessica.
So today's video is second chance romances. We have 10 second chance romance recs for you guys. But before we get started with that, Mandy.
All right, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you're entered to win these signed books by Kala Reed. Thank you, Kala, for those books. And all you have to do to enter is just click that subscribe button and you'll be entered to win. You can also follow us on Instagram for an extra entry.
Okay. Do you read a lot of second chance romance, do you think?
I don't. I had to really dig deep to find these.
I would have normally said yes. And then when I went to go make this list, I was like, maybe I don't. I like them if they're done right, but I didn't realize that I didn't read that many of them. So,
yeah.
So my first book is an M. Robinson book. It's also a football book. But this is Second Chance Scandal by M. Robinson. She does a lot of second chance romances from what I've read anyway. So this is about Sophie and Jax. Jax is an NFL star, and he has this scandal that happens. And so his team, his people are like, you know what? In order to make this better, we want you to get married. And it can be an arranged marriage. It can be, it needs to be at least for 6 months, but we have to clean up your image. And so his team picks somebody from his past, which is Sophie, to be his wife, like to be his wife for 6 months. Sophie was the maid's daughter when he was growing up. Her mom worked in his parents had this big old house in Texas, and she worked there. And so he and Sophie were together when they were younger, and then they split up, and now she gets brought in as his wife, but she's also bringing his child that he doesn't know about. So there's my first rec. Yeah.
All right.
What do you got?
Well, I'm going to just knock it out of the park with a taboo second chance romance.
Woo, okay. Sounds good.
So I have Stepbrother Dearest by Penelope Ward. So this is Alec and Greta. And so Alec comes to live with Greta and her mom and her stepdad. Now, Greta's stepdad has been a pretty decent dad to her, but he and his son do not get along, and it's just not been a good relationship. And so Alec, I hope I'm saying his name right.
Is it A-L-E?
E-L-E-C.
Then it must be Alec. That's different.
Unless I wrote it down wrong. Anyway, so Alec comes to live with them, and it's just, he's kind of that typical bad boy, rebellious, doesn't get along with his dad type guy. And this is their senior year in high school. And she and him, like, she ends up kind of falling for him, and they what am I saying? They end up having a relationship together, and he takes her virginity. And then all of a sudden he just ups and leaves to go live with his mom, and they don't see each other again. Then we fast forward years later, and he comes back to town for a funeral. There's angst because he's in a very committed relationship, and she's never gotten over him. So we have our second chance right there in Forbidden Taboo Land.
Okay. I'm going to see your Forbidden Taboo Land and raise you a dark.
Ooh, okay.
Okay. This one's a little different, but I didn't want just straight up the second chance. Like, I was like, I want one that I'm going to want to read, right? Like, that's yummy. So I'm going to give that to everybody. So this is dark. So I've talked about this one a couple times, but this is Slasher Pass by Tyler Page. This is the one that is based on horror flicks. So this is an MFM, but this is Isley, Kansas, and Constantine. So when they were little, they were like 11. They were in this cult, these 3 kids, and they were kept in a room. They had been kidnapped, and they were in this room with like no windows. They'd been there for quite a while, a couple of years. They depended on each other. They were best friends, the 3 of them. And then one day Isley gets her period, and the mothers of the group, so these women that they referred to as mother, come and they tell him, okay, well, now you got to make a choice where you're going to come up and be a part of this ritual. They pull the 3 kids up, and they're not the only kids kept in this place. They're not the only ones that this is happening to. And they get them up for this upstairs for this ritual, and she has to choose one of these boys is to be her husband, and they go through the ceremony, and the boy she didn't choose for the husband is to be sacrificed. So after the ceremony, one of the boys causes a scene, and the other two leave and are able to flee. So then we fast forward. They believe that the one boy died. He was the preacher's son in this group, and they believe that he's gone, he's dead. He never made it out. So now we fast forward. They're in their early 20s, and these 2 who had escaped are still close friends, and they're very, very close. There's some things that happen between them, but nothing. They've never started a real relationship. And Isley's watching the news one day, and there's a crew that's come to do a documentary on that church or that cult and what had happened. And they go to interview somebody, and it's the boy who they thought was dead, the one that she married. And he's like, I'm back, and I'm back for my wife. So there you have it.
Hey.
Yeah.
So
that was
I'm gonna change it up again.
Okay, what do you got?
I got age gap and dad's friend.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So it seemed like a good idea at the time by Kylie Scott. So we have our heroine who grows up kind of with Pete. And so this was part of the story that I'm like, this is interesting. So her dad is kind of always too busy, and Pete ends up kind of stepping into this role as he works for Pete, and he steps into this role often as her father, kind of like a father figure, but more like a friend. So like she likes to go to the beach, so he'll take her to the beach because her dad's busy working, and just things like that. And for a teenage girl, this turns into kind of a crush on him, and she feels like Pete doesn't want anything to happen between the two of them until she's of age. So on her 18th birthday, much to Pete's horror and her father's horror, she kisses Pete. Her dad sees, and all hell kind of breaks loose. Hence that it seemed like a good idea at the time title. And she flees, and she goes to live with her mom and doesn't see Pete or her dad really for 7 years. And her dad is getting remarried, and so she comes back for the wedding, and that is where she's forced to be around Pete, because Pete and her dad have worked through through the trauma of her 18th birthday and have remained friends and coworkers. So there's our second chance.
Okay. So mine is this is good. We just keep piling on here. It's a dark, it's captor captive, and a forced relationship both times. Just getting wilder and wilder.
I'm gonna end up having to bring it back down.
I am too. It goes down after this. But okay, so let's talk about this one. This is Lawless God, and it is by Lola King. I read this as an arc earlier this year, and I just loved it. So this is about Kayla and Nathan. Kayla is the leader of her own little crime group, her own little gang, and she, like, I think it was 4 years prior to the book starting, when the book first starts, before the story really gets going, she is forced to give herself to Nate. It's something her dad has had her do. So she and Nate have a relationship that she really doesn't want to be a part of. She's having sex with him, but she's doing it to get information out of him. He's a psychopath. He has no feelings. He's crazy. And he runs his own little group of people, his own little gang, his own little mafia clique over here. And she just wants nothing to do with him. She doesn't realize she's catching feelings for him. She just wants him gone. So she sets him up and blames a crime on him so that he will go to prison. So she puts him in prison for 4 years, like testifies at his trial and everything. Then she starts getting phone calls 4 years later. She's running her little gang, and she's really busy. She's not answering the calls. And by the time she finally answers this call several days in, she finds out that Nate has been released from prison, and he's coming for her. And so he comes and he gets her, and he steals her, and he keeps her, and they find love, because that's how that works. Because, Crazy psychopaths deserve love too.
Okay.
All right. You gonna break it down now?
Well, extra trope wise, yes.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna bring the heat with
Okay.
this cover.
All right. Okay. All right.
All right. Well, if you pick up this book, this is what you get to look at. So really, the wreck is over. Go. No. Okay, so we have Wrong for You by Harlow Ray. I don't know why I love this cover so much. Well, I do know why.
We all know why you love that cover.
Okay, so Jake has a daughter named, well, wait, let me back up. Jake, this is Jake, and Harper are, I think they're teenagers. Like, he's maybe a little bit older than her, and she's, I think it's like after her senior year. They're still young, okay? And they have been dating, and he asks her to meet him, and he breaks up with her. And she is devastated because she like fell head over heels for him and thought he was the one. And it turns out he finds out that his previous hookup got pregnant and said he's the dad, and so he's doing the right thing, and he's going to try and make a relationship work with her for the sake of their kid. And so Harper is devastated, but she goes off and leaves, and she's brokenhearted. She comes back years later and opens up a dance studio, and Jake is living there, and he has full custody of his daughter Sydney. And Sydney wants to take dance, and so she takes dance at Harper's new studio, and that kind of forces the two of them back together. So there's lots of sweet moments in this book because we have that single dad going on and all that stuff. So there's my rec.
There's your rec.
Again.
Okay. Look at the cover. You just gonna sit there and stare at it. Okay. So while Mandy's doing that, I'll tell you about my next book.
Do you think when he takes his hat off, he's bald under there?
He probably is, just like my brother. And then you go, wait, where'd it go?
Jessica.
But he is.
That crystal line. Okay. So, top this cover, Jessica.
Okay. Got the cover. Okay. So I don't know that I can, but I'm gonna bring the comedy with this next one. So I actually read this book. I know. I read this book yesterday. I didn't realize that I wasn't planning on reading it, but I'd read another book in this series, and it was so good that I immediately jumped into this one. And I was like, oh, it's Second Chance. And it was so funny and so cute that I had to include it in this video. So this one is called Boomerangers. Boomerangers, that's just fun to say. And it's by Heather M. Orgeron, and it is about Spencer and Cooper. So Spencer is our heroine, and she is a mom of 3 boys. She's only been with 3 men in her life, but she has a set of twins from her first marriage, and then she had a fling that gave her her 2-year-old. So her twins, I think, are like 12 at this time, and then she has her 2-year-old. The dad of the twins he's just one of those crappy dads who never shows up to pick up his kids when he's supposed to, and he always has excuses, and every once in a while he'll do it, but he's just not really in the picture. He's not very good about being a dad. And then you have the 2-year-old's dad, who doesn't even know his gender because he wants nothing to do with the baby. He chose to go the minute she found out she was pregnant. And so she's a sex therapist. So is her best friend. And one day she gets told that the clinic that they work in is closing down. And she decides she's going to move home to the small town that her mom lives in and where she grew up. And so her mom is all excited for her to move home. And she's like, what is going on? Well, little does she know that at the same time, her ex-boyfriend, her first love, the real love of her life, Cooper, has just gone through a divorce, and he's moved home, and their mothers are best friends that live across the street from each other. So they have set this situation up. And so when she moves home, there's Cooper. Now, Cooper doesn't want kids at all, doesn't even like kids. And that's part of the problem because she has 3 boys. I loved this for like the comedy because the 2-year-old calls Cooper Pooper because he can't say Cooper. And the relationship between the kids And Cooper is, first of all, hilarious. There's a lot of funny things. That 2-year-old, he is quite the crack up in this one. But their relationship, because he's told by another friend that if you want to get her back, you have to get in with her kids. Like that's the way to do it. So I loved it. It was funny. It was an easy listen. It was a great time.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. What else?
All right. My next second chance romance is called The Best Thing by Mariana Zapata.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So this is a slow burn, which I've been told most of her books are.
Mm-hmm.
The blurb is extremely vague, so I've gone back and forth with how to talk about this book without giving anything away. So it's told kind of in a dual timeline, and we have Lenny and Jonah. And Lenny and Jonah have had a relationship, and something has happened that ceased that relationship. And Lenny, even though she desperately tried to get a hold of Jonah, has not heard from him. And so she goes, back home, goes into her own life and just, gets started trying to repair her, like rebuild her life basically. And she's moved on and wants nothing to do with Jonah at this point. And that's when Jonah shows up, and he's a little confused by why Lenny seems so upset with him. And that's where I'm going to leave it, because I really can't say anymore because I don't want to. There's other things happening in this book, obviously, but I feel like any more details is kind of too spoilery.
Okay. All right. So for my last book,
it's a go in blind book.
A go in blind book. We like those sometimes. Those are good. Okay. So my last book is historical. 1983 historical. I cannot believe that they call this historical. It blows my mind. But we're going to talk about Return to Monte Carlo by Kate C. Wells. I've loved everything I've ever read by Kate C. Wells. But this takes place in 1983, which apparently makes it historical. And it is about Diane and Marco. So Diane is a Southern belle. She's from the South. She's, she's got the Southern mannerisms. Why can't I say that right?
I don't know what's wrong with you.
I don't know. Yeah.
Mannerism.
Thank you. She's a good Southern girl. And one day she meets Marco, who is traveling. His family lives in Monte Carlo, and he is a businessman. She's working at the hotel that he's staying at, and they meet. They hit it off immediately. They start going at it, and he decides he's going to marry her and bring her home. She was a virgin when they met, the whole nine. So he brings her back to Monte Carlo. His family is horrible. Like, his mother-in-law thinks that she's a vapid debutante who just wants to shop. And he is very invested in his business and in his work. And so he is always gone. And she's left alone with the in-laws, who are horrible. And so one day, it's their anniversary, and he doesn't come home. He completely forgets. And she lives in the same villa with all of her in-laws too. So that just has to be horrible. And she has a breaking point. Something happens and it's her breaking point, and she decides that she is going to leave. She's going back to the States. And so she goes home. She up and leaves him. She goes home. And then it takes a few months before he comes to find her. But he comes and finds her and takes her back to Monte Carlo, where they have to work on their stuff. Like, he needs to grow a pair and cut the umbilical cord. So I loved this one. I really, really loved this one. And the gap between the relationship isn't very long, because, she takes back something to the States that neither one of them was expecting. So that it has a cooking time. So,
time jumps usually irritate me in books.
Yeah. This one, you don't really see much of a time jump, because we do see when she gets back, there's a little bit of a jump where it's been a few months and she's trying to get her life back on track before he shows up, but it's not a huge time jump. So that's why I like that one.
All right.
Okay. What's your last one?
Okay. My last one is Undertow by Elizabeth O'Rourke. Okay. And I do believe this might be one of her very first books, because it was published back in 2013. So we have Maura and Nate, and Maura grows up very, very rich, like very wealthy. And her grandpa is more down to earth and kind of relates better to Mara,
Mm.
Mara. And her mom and grandma are more concerned with appearances than anybody's well being. And this family is so incredibly wealthy that they're actually doing like arranged marriages to further their wealth and place in high society. So Mara has been already like arranged marriage promised to someone else, and she doesn't even know it. So we have Nate, who is the help's kid, and they grow up together in the summers because Mara goes to her grandpa and grandma's estate in the summer. And so they spend every summer together and they're very good friends. And that leads to more when they become teenagers, which she kind of has to hide because her grandma and mom would not approve at all. And then one day, Nate unexpectedly just disappears out of her life, and she is traumatized by this. And now we have them coming back together several years later. So we have our second chance, but obviously something else has been going on there.
Okay. All right, so that's it. That's our 10
Right.
right?
Those are our second chance romance recs.
Yes, they are.
So, in those comments, what are some of your favorites? As Jessica and I already kind of said, this isn't a trope we normally gravitate to. Like, if it just happens to be there, yay. If not, it's not something we're seeking out usually. So, tell us, what are your favorites? So we have some good recs there to go check out as well.
Mm-hmm.
And make sure you check back on Mondays, Thursdays, and Saturdays for new videos from us. Hit that notification button so you get notifications whenever we drop extra videos, because we do really like dropping extra videos.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that sums it all up.
That does, yeah. So thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next video.